Hello and welcome to Dixon Cox with me, Nick Dixon, and Paul Cox. This is the show where we go through the main political stories from the week in a light-hearted fashion, although it is quite difficult this week because horrible things have happened. I have dealt with the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk on two other shows with Simon Evans and with Jamie Franklin on this channel, so we're probably not going to go over it fully again today, though we will talk about it at the end, probably in the paywall section. Those two shows are free. I wanted anyone to have those, but probably today we'll go back to the normal format, and you can hear our update on that in the paywall section at the end because Pam Bondi has said something mental that we'll be discussing. But I thought we would start by talking about the Unite the Kingdom rally back here in Britain and Danny Krueger's defection to Reform UK, which are both big stories. But Paul, firstly, I thought I'd check how you're doing.
I'm okay. Interestingly, the last time we recorded Dixon Cox, within an hour of us finishing recording, literally before it had gone live on Substack and YouTube, the terrible assassination of Charlie Kirk happened, and obviously you and I were engaging in that. To the point, I don't know if you realise, but we never actually promoted the last Dixon Cox at all. It just went out and people saw it, and we didn't do any tweets about it because it just, I guess it just didn't seem right to do so.
Yeah.
If anyone was wondering why that was, that's exactly why that was. And it's, we discussed off air, and we'll discuss in the paywall section just how it's left us feeling more so about the reaction to it than anything else.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to talk about it now, except I've done 2 whole hour shows now.
Yeah, I think people should go and see that. I've seen the Simon Evans one. I've not seen the Jamie one yet, but Simon Evans was great, and I'm not going to better that.
Yeah, it's basically anger, disgust at the response, sadness, and and resolve to try and fight these demonic scumbags. That's basically the summary of it. But yeah, but there's been developments, so we'll get in at the end towards the end. We'll get into the Pam Bondi stuff. Really, she's got it wrong because she's talking about hate speech. It's not about that. It's about you shouldn't be able to celebrate murder and have a job as a teacher. This is basic, and this is not to do with hate speech. It's to do with basic decorum. But we'll get into that. But I thought we should start with this United Kingdom rally because that's also a massive news. I mean, a massive piece of news. And of course, the usual things are happening with people calling it far right and so on. Now, estimates that 600,000 people went from the aerial AI shots. That's probably a decent estimate. It might be more than that. I remember going to the London anti-Iraq war marches, and of course, the police played down the numbers. People who went said it was 1 million. Police said, oh, it's a few 100,000. In this case, police have been saying 110,000. Others have been saying 1 million. Some people have been saying more than that. Even the anti-protest, the leftist counter protesters said it was far more than the 110,000, and it was a huge number.
I mean, the aerial shots of Waterloo Bridge alone, just Waterloo Bridge down to IMAX, you would get 200,000 to 300,000 in that space alone. And that wasn't even the extent of it. The idea that it was 110, very specific 110, is ludicrous.
Yeah, they picked a number to make it sound like they know, like they've actually counted it. It's like, well, let's put a 10
I think it was the maximum they were willing to accept was capable of being achieved.
Yeah, and so
it couldn't possibly be more than that. It could,
Yeah, therefore it's way more. I remember Paxman said back in the Iraq War March, someone went on there and said, well, it was this number. And he goes, well, the police say it was this number. And he says, well, yeah, they're obviously lying. Are you seriously saying the police are lying about it? It's like a time when you could even seriously say a sentence like that. It's like, oh, the authorities don't always tell the truth. It's like, yes, why would the police say the real number? Anyway, so people had all sorts of reactions, obviously moronic and some reasonable. I thought we'd start with a fairly reasonable one from Trevor Phillips. And he had this to say.
It's quite possible that the person most taken aback by the huge turnout at yesterday's Unite the Kingdom demonstration was its organizer, the hard-right activist known as Tommy Robinson. 150,000 people crammed into central London, most carrying national flags, the Union Jack, the Cross of St. George, even the Scottish saltire, protesting about immigration, about free speech, and about the decline of Christianity. There was some fearsome rhetoric, including from Elon Musk, who called for the overthrow of the British government. At the margins, there was some hooliganism. But I think that for those who oppose Robinson and his ilk, the most alarming aspect of the event was just how normal the vast majority of the marches were. I spent an hour or two amongst them, and my own impression was that they were mostly the sort of people you'd meet in a country pub or in half-time queue for the loo at football or at a concert. There was a sprinkling of black and brown faces, and the event was brought to a close by a gospel group singing Jerusalem. All that must worry the traditional mass parties, Labour and Conservatives, now polling at less than 40% between them. They're draining support to parties like Reform and the Greens. And yet, a man recently out of jail, condemned as an extremist thug by most mainstream media outlets, can rally a demo the size of the entire population of Cambridge or Blackpool. A feat you couldn't imagine either Sir Keir Starmer or Kemi Badenoch pulling off anytime soon. Perhaps the people are sending us all a message. Let's see if anyone at Westminster's listening.
All right. Quite interesting. So a few things spring out to me, Paul, and then I'll let you go. I mean, obviously, when he starts by saying hard right about Tommy Robinson, silliness, really, because he's
it's
not...
about the softest they're willing to do. He can probably get away with it, Sky. I think that's, kudos is what I would say to that. I'm not comfortable with it, but I think we both know that that's probably the softest his producers allowed him to go.
Yeah, it wasn't far right. It was hard right, whatever that is. Yeah, it's silly because Tommy's views, as I've said, ad nauseum, really are the same as... I mean, I think I was the first person to say Douglas Murray is Tommy Robinson with a posh accent. I literally think I invented that. But then...
I've never heard anyone else say it.
Well, they do say it now, but I don't even use that example because they even think Douglas Murray's extreme. So I like to say, actually, his views are the same as Sam Harris because he's a liberal and he's also pro-Israel. So the other day I said a Zionist Christopher Hitchens, because on Islam, Tommy is the same as any of those people. It's really just because he is working class. And I just look at it dispassionately. Yes, the way he's done things hasn't always been great. That's true. But also for some of my audience, he's far too pro-Israel. My audience is divided on that. But he is sort of a Zionist neoliberal. He wants all ethnicities to come together and all this kind of thing. That was very much what it was about. There was a Maori hacker on the stage, as Trevor Phillips said, there was Jerusalem gospel. Yeah. So this is very mainstream stuff. Some people pointed out actually the speakers were less mainstream than the people going. And there's some truth in that. If there was Eric Zemmour there, who's sort of known as reasonably pretty far to the right in France, probably because he speaks in French, no one really knows what he's on about. But there is an argument for that. At least Trevor Phillips is trying to be sensible. We've seen people like Richard Bergen, and we might get into Keir Starmer's response and Sadiq Khan's response in a minute, and Sultana and all these other nutcases. But Richard Bergen, this sort of half-wit from the Labour Party, said that, we're for the first time we're facing a far-right extremist government. And we'll get on to later how Reform is basically just the Tories. So we're a far-right extremist government consisting of the people that were in the last government, like Danny Krueger, Lee Anderson, Sarah Pochin. They're all far-right extremists now. It's the same people. So it's complete nonsense. And if you look at the number of people going to it, who are these people? Is it realistic, Richard et al. And Sadiq, that the British sort of mass of people, what in China is called the Lao Beijing, which means the old 100 surnames, which means the general people, the ordinary British people, the British folk, who have always been small c conservative and patriotic, which has always annoyed the left, because they can't use them, they say, okay, they're far right. But how likely is it that these people disappeared who have always been there, who fought the war, etc., 2 world wars? They've disappeared, and suddenly just loads and loads of Nazis have come in, hundreds of thousands of them. Is that likely, or is it far more likely that in your warped worldview, you can only characterize them as far right, and also that it just suits your needs to do that? But it's not even credible, is it?
No. Look, there's been some sort of preset rhetorical rhetoric default that's been designed. Remember during COVID when they showed almost across America and across Britain, I think it was America at the time, that each presenter said exactly the same thing. Repeat. Somebody has either by osmosis or, like I say, by some sort of preset default, set what the response to this will be. They have decided very quickly, irrespective of all the things that went on last week and how dangerous rhetoric like that can be, they've decided very quickly that the rhetoric will be far right, thuggery, dangerous, fascism, 2 steps away from the nastiest things you can imagine. Must stop it now. If we don't stop it now, the end is nigh. And they're all parroting it. It's going to take somebody of, substantial critical thinking to stand out on the left and say, well, hang on a minute. Trevor Phillips there, incredibly articulate in describing how that looks to the standard person on the streets who's still not engaged with it. Okay. And it's really important that, because there are two views of what happened on Saturday. One is what we've been allowed to see across all media, including GB News, showing sort of aspects of violence, aspects of far right stuff. And then there are my friends who went. Eve, who is 80, her two daughters in their 50s and 60s, their husbands, the dog, that have not been politically energized ever in their lives, born in the 60s, went through punk, have lived through Thatcherism, were well into their 30s and 40s by the time the 90s come along, never really engaged in politics, but have that wealth of experience over time to look back and go, we don't like the way things are changing, and are going along almost fearful that they might be associated with the far right because they're being told it is, only to arrive and find out that it was a jubilant festival that they absolutely loved. And for the first time, these people got in touch and said to me, even GB News' coverage they didn't like, by the way, said to me, what we saw, what we felt, how it was conducted was fantastic. The way it's been represented is disgusting. And I'm saying to them, they mainly got in touch because of the GB News stuff. One of them was, I'm never watching GB News again. Genuinely, they thought it was badly represented across all forms of media. What they're saying for the first time is they're seeing that duplicity. They're seeing that narrative being managed. And what we did see from the large and vast majority of people on Saturday was this jubilant festival, a celebration of all things British. If you're going to turn Christianity into right-wing propaganda, then you're on the wrong foot. You are totally on the wrong foot. It's not. If you're going to turn the people in the queue at the football, the people in the country pub into right-wing nutters, they're not. Demonstrably, they're not. They're the sort of salt of the earth. They might have traditional views that you disagree with, but they care about this country, and this is what this country is about. And they've even tried to say the flag, either the Union flag or the St. George Cross, is now a symbol of the far right, and that it's for everybody, by the way. Listen to that over and over from the left. The flag is for everybody. It's not for everybody. It's for people that are English. It's for people that are British. And it's people that support those views. That's the whole point of the bloody flag. It's a bit like me carrying the Welsh flag and saying I'm Welsh. I'm not. The cross of St. Andrew. I'm not Scottish. They'd have a big problem with it if I said I was. That's the point of the flag. It differentiates. It discriminates, either positively or negatively. But that depends on your opinion of the world. It does discriminate deliberately. And through multiculturalism, DEI, and this over-tolerance, which is completely intolerant, we've decided that everything must mean everything to everyone. It doesn't. And that's the problem.
And Ben Habib said that actually in response to Sadiq Khan. He said, you talk of our flag. Do you understand and accept it's inherently a Christian flag representing the Christian saints of England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland? I mean, you can see actually Callum from Lotus, formerly of Lotus, did a good tweet showing how the flags come together. In case anyone's forgotten, you literally have, you put them together. It's a Union Jack. I mean, people know this, but it was just good to see it. And those are the Christian saints of those countries. As you talk about Christianity, so yeah, that is what the flag means. But and maybe
it's as important as the badge on your team, your football team shirt. You are either a supporter or not a supporter. I'm a Portsmouth fan. You're a Man United fan. If all of a sudden I started wearing a Man United kit and saying I support this, always have done, you'd question it.
It's funny you mention that. Later on, I might say I was going to say actually how Kemi Badenoch reminds me of Amarim, because she just is stubbornly sticking to what's not working. And he reminded me of the Man United manager. But maybe we should have a quick look at Keir Starmer's tweet, which is very much on these themes. So Starmer says, people have a right to peaceful protest. It is core to our country's values, but we will not stand for assaults on police officers doing their job, or for people feeling intimidated on our streets because of their background or the colour of their skin. Strange one. Britain is a nation proudly built on tolerance, diversity, and respect. Our flag represents our diverse country, and we will never surrender it to those who use it as a symbol of violence, fear, and division. utterly bizarre statement. I unpicked it here. I said the people most intimidated because of their background and skin color are the white working class. See, for example, the grooming gangs, which you refuse an inquiry into. Britain is not built on tolerance, diversity, and respect. That's just an inane mantra of your flimsy ideology. The protest was nothing to do with violence, fear, and division. Perhaps you're thinking of the BLM riots you kneeled for, or the Notting Hill carnage. Anyway, you'll be gone soon, but sadly only to be replaced by some other Fabian dweeb. So I'm not going to top that, which is why I read these things out. But
I especially like Fabian dweeb. That's delicious.
Because we've talked about the Fabian Society. Look it up.
Well, we know that's why they're lumbering beasts. They can't react quickly to anything, and the more they look like they've got no philosophy. Because Fabianism is all about the softly catchy monkey approach, and it's done over decades. And he's just a component in a huge cog. They don't know how to manage this stuff at the moment because the times they are changing.
Yeah, and it's just all the things we said. It's diversity. What does it mean? Our flag represents our diversity. Our country is built on tolerance, diversity, and respect. Not really. It's based on conquest.
It's not at all. And they don't look within the union either. They don't understand the union. There's only one party who's ever been built on the union, and it's always forgotten. It's the Conservative Unionist Party, because they understand that's what it's about. That's what they're conserving and preserving. That's the point. Labour haven't done that. Labour never came from that theology. Well, it's not theology, it's a philosophy. But and reform is something different, okay? It's taking conservative values and tackling the big issues of the day. But the idea that England, Scotland, and Wales were all some multicultural, harmonious pot is absolutely ridiculous. There's flipping walls everywhere for a start. I mean, what's Hadrian's Wall all about? That's not about diversity and tolerance. That's about keeping the buggers out.
Isn't it incredible? You've got these inane values. It's like when we remember the 5 British values we kept hearing about quite recently. It's like, where have they come? Just something like focus grouped and in some
2002
PowerPoint presentation, and then you retroactively try and attach them to all of British history. It's like, it's just utter nonsense, utter ahistorical corporate Fabian bilge, and it's just like, we just shut up, Starmer. Of course, he's going to go anyway.
No, of course, he's on his way. The only way you achieve anything near what they want is through debate and discussion, which they shut down at every frigging turn.
Did you see Zara Sultana? Where is Keir Starmer? Where is the leadership? Fascists marched on our streets yesterday, and he hasn't said a single word. Instead, the Prime Minister spent his time defending the best pals of paedophiles. That's a strange... Oh, I guess he's talking about Mandelson, of course. She's talking about Mandelson. He is a coward. He should resign. I mean, she got the last bit right. But imagine calling people fascists. I just said there were no fascists. You're just trying to get normal British people killed. Because, of course, after Charlie Kirk, you say that. You say fascist. You're putting a target on people. Sadiq Khan, of course, absolutely the same. We must unite against those who seek to divide us. He has this statement. I know many people, particularly from London's diverse communities, are feeling extremely worried following the events this weekend. It takes me back to how I felt growing up in the 70s and 80s when far-right political parties marched on our streets. The leaders of the far right are once again attempting to hijack our flag, with minorities being intimidated and fear, hatred, and division being sown. As Londoners and as proud Brits, we must unite to reject the far right, just as we have many times before. But it's going to take a huge effort from us all, from people of all races and backgrounds who are willing to stand up for our British values of equality, inclusion, and mutual respect. Those are the British values. As mayor, I'll continue to do everything I can to challenge the far right and all those who peddle the politics of fear and division. I urge all the politicians in London to do the same. And I'll just quickly read my response. What I was worried was a little bit too moderate. Oh, it's gone. And that's annoying. Well, I'll find it in a second, Paul.
Look at that handsome chap.
Yeah. What did you think of... it's gone for some reason. What did you think of that statement from Sultana and Khan?
Well, they both talk of tolerance, but have none themselves. They're designated arbiters of truth. So they have decided what's good, bad, and indifferent. Okay? That doesn't work. You have to debate your point. You can't just say that's bad and we're good. We can all do that. Anybody can do that. Harold Shipman can say that. Just put them, I've just given them the easy way out. I was doing the best I could. Everybody's got a perspective and a prism through which they look, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you have to. I'll go back to the point I was making just shortly before you showed that, and that is that you achieve the things you want to achieve through debate and discussion. And because debate and discussion is closed down so much now, you end up with these mass marches on the streets of London, so people can see the point is the overall point of that was unity. If Tommy Robinson's to believe as hell. However, I think for me the overall point was to say to Westminster, look and listen, learn.
Yeah.
None of those things are happening at all. They have seen such a large number and gone, we need to stop it. It can't happen. I'm sorry, but that's not going to work.
It was very much about being listened to and heard. Let's just read my tweet because I promised it. I replied to Sadiq Khan, your word spells don't work anymore, you vile snake. The day we eject you will be like Gandalf kicking out Wormtongue. We will never forget how you've tried to demonize and abuse our people, our country, and our flag. Get out of our capital city, you sniveling cretin. Well, I could have just probably said that.
Love a Tolkien reference.
9.5 thousand likes. So and how? Let's actually just check how many has his got. I'll confidently check this on the podcast and see. 5K, so I've almost doubled Khan there. So pretty
the great ratio.
Victory.
The great ratio of inconvenience.
The great ratio. So, and Mike Cernovich retweeted that, which is always good. We'll finish on this topic, Paul, but I just wanted to say, maybe we'll say one more thing, which kind of leads into the next topic, which is about Elon Musk. And they talked about Musk causing a lot of problems and wanting the government overthrown. He said, fight back. Obviously, Musk has just seen the horrible murder of Charlie Kirk, and he's in the same country, and he's in a position where he has had attempts on his life and has to have security, and he's very much one of the targets. So you can see why he might be kind of bullish. Yes, he could be more sensible, and he could be more specific about what he means. And that's always a criticism of Musk. He posts these things, fight back, we need to do this, and we need to do that. It's like, we're all the richest man in the world. Can you give us concrete things or give us some money? You know what I mean? Like, it's a little bit, it can be a bit like slop if I wanted to be. I tried to compose in my head a statement I would make as prime minister that wasn't Keir Starmer's statement. That was the most normie prime minister statement I could think of. And it ended up sounding almost exactly like something Farage would say. You'd probably say, right, well, look, Tommy Robinson, we don't agree with some of the methods he's used, but people look to him because they're feeling not heard. They're normal British people, which Farage did say that part. Elon Musk could be a bit more useful in the way he does things. There's a statement you can make. And actually, Farage did make that statement. So very kind of, he's now speaking as the kind of rational kind of, for some people throwing Tommy under the bus too much, but imagine you're sort of actually trying to be prime minister. He's now saying the prime ministerial things, where Starmer's just saying something that bears no relation to reality. And the fact that hundreds of thousands of people come out, they're not Nazis, as we've said. So he's just completely out of touch with the people. Yeah.
There is also a struggle on the right to be the leader of the revolution. And there are a number of players, in that, I was going to say friendly battle. It's not entirely friendly, but there is a sort of cohesive lump that's forming now, with probably Nigel Farage as the most legitimate leader of all of that. And I think he's been very careful also to stand back and make some observations about the weekend without treading all over it. And he infamously, famously, whichever way you want to look at it, has always made sure that he's detached himself from Tommy Robinson as an entity and essentially told us he shouldn't be the leader of the revolution, that Nigel himself should be. We're seeing some very interesting things take place now because of the panic. There is a panic to this. The reason I know there's a panic is you watch some of the reaction videos to this from prominent left-wing commentators, talkers, politicos. They're not only are they all saying the same thing, they're creating a very dark picture to say, if we carry on down this path, we're in 1930s Germany. It's not true. It's simply not true. I would say to them that now's the time to listen. And I would also say to them that, not that I'm saying here that Adolf Hitler was right. I mean, obviously, I've got a tattoo of Adolf Hitler on my chest, and I'm going through some work to get an even bigger one on my back. But that's mainly because I appreciated his art, and he was a great orator, Nick. But I would say if people had spoken to Adolf Hitler during the 20s and early 30s, they may have been able to reach some understanding of where he was.
That was the best time to catch him. That was the best time because he was on the.
And they didn't. So unbeknownst to us right now, and it's not Tommy Robinson and it's not Nigel Farage, there is someone in there who could be being radicalized on either side of the left or right at the moment that we're totally unaware of, and we are creating a very fertile patch for that to happen by shutting down discourse.
Paul,
They have to listen.
Let me ask you the sort of $1 million classic question. If you had a time machine and could go back, would you give Hitler advice on how to do better politically?
For me, I would, first of all, I'd talk to the people at the art universities and say, please let him in. Honestly,
it's just give him an A. I know it's not perfect.
Please distract him. It's not that bad. Look at some of his postcards. And let him in. That could have solved every single problem. So first of all,
something like, "Have you tried watercolors?" You know what I mean?
Don't just dismiss
do you
him.
like Turner? Yeah, just yeah.
And maybe there are other things to do other than kill babies, i.e. Hitler. A lot of people say just go back and kill baby Hitler. Great. Try explaining that to the court at the time. They have no idea what's going to happen in the future. You just killed a baby, you monster.
An innocent baby. Yeah, with Norm Macdonald, that's a good point. Norm Macdonald always had a joke about, I'd go back, but I'd probably get hypnotized by his mesmerizing eyes and end up doing
exactly as he asked. I mean, the Versailles Agreement, basically punished Germany and its citizens into a point where you create Adolf Hitler. There are a whole bunch of things that you could look at that could have helped the situation, right?
You would go back and rewrite Versailles. It's a much more realistic, sober time machine.
Yeah, because by the way, if this, because he was born in 1889, if me and my
knows all the exact dates.
Yeah, of course I do. It's written on the back. 89 to 45, R.I.P. Sorry, and obviously all of my children have got him as a middle name.
Yeah,
but imagine Paul Cox goes back to 1890. I've got him. He's dead. Now what you've done is you've killed a baby, you dickhead. It doesn't. Yeah. That's not how this works. And I genuinely believe all that. Some of that's a joke, by the way. If you just tuned in for the first time, some of it's a joke.
Some of it may be satire. Yeah, I just imagine you on TV News saying this, just get stared at by one of those normies they have on the panel. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Paul. What you're trying to imply?
Exactly that in that accent. So your tattoos, Paul. Right? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Why'd you have a tattoo of Adolf? And you're just like having to explain.
But do you know what? Humor. I did try and make a very sensible point there. There was a point in time where you could have spoken to these people and not dismissed them. And I'm, by the way, again, not equating him with Farage, Robinson, or anyone like that. You have to go and read. You have to go and read. I think there's a book called Bloodlands by Timothy Schneider. Go and read that. Get a really good understanding of what happened in European politics pre-war, post-World War I, pre-World War II. There was a whole bunch of shit going on. It was a fertile patch for someone like Hitler to grow. We haven't got that person at the moment. That's if you think that's Farage and Robinson, you haven't read history and you don't understand. You've got a much bigger problem. Start listening to these people. If you've got 1 million people last Saturday, and some of them are still uneasy, some of them don't want to be associated, but they're worried. Imagine what it's like when you legitimize that. You're going to have 10 million people in London, and then then there's no turning back. And none of us, populism's fine. I have absolutely no issue with populism. And this is the line that Nigel Farage is trying to tread at the moment.
Well, populism just means the liberal elites are post-liberal and don't like democracy anymore. So anyone that still likes democracy, they call populist. It's as cynical as that. That's all it is.
And if you are going to demonize the populists, you are just ignoring anything that come out of it. And I would say open up dialogue. Don't assassinate people who want to debate, and start to talk, because the times they are changing. They are definitely changing. And if you don't start talking to people now, they will keep fighting. And this is the kind, we get back to Elon Musk. It's okay to say fight. It just depends on how you mean it. We're so scared that we're going to incite something and therefore commit a crime in this country that people can't talk passionately. And you're right, it was cumbersome. I don't think Elon Musk. I don't think Elon Musk is the right man to lead the revolution either. I don't think he's the orator.
Yeah, Trump said fight, and it just meant a defiant
when he got shot, by the way.
against political violence is what it meant in that context. It was anti-violence. And
Sorry,
look at
we
what's
never
happened
talk over each other.
since Charlie Kirk was killed. What's happened? Nothing. No riots. Nothing. And that's because the right's not violent like that. It's a fight against these far left freaks who are terrorists. That's basically what it is. But when you say about the reaction on the left, Paul, I'm going back to something you said like a little while ago. I've noticed two main reactions. One is the Richard Bergen, Starmer, Sadiq Khan, Sultana reaction, just complete denial, you're far right, you're scum, complete denial of reality, or deliberately disingenuous. And the other one actually is the more sort of, oh, we have a problem. Even if the people are not good people either, they're just going, oh, we have a problem tactically, like we're done. Like those people who said, oh, our counter demonstration was feeble and the demonstration was massive. And they're actually scared. They're going, oh, we've just been massively outnumbered here. And then they're realistic and they go, oh, what are we going to do? Even if they're tactically trying to, fight back and destroy us or whatever, they're going, well, what do we do? So, and there's a more Trevor Phillips, more thoughtful version of that, which is, oh, these guys seem to be onto something. And obviously they are onto something, and what they're onto is a complete failure of our current parties. And maybe that's where we should get on to Danny Krueger, unless you've got something more to add.
No, the only thing I would say is they're entrenched in the convention of 100 years of politics that have looked a certain way. And that is not how the future is going to look. And, they keep talking about being progressive. There's nothing progressive about sticking to the convention. And they don't know that it's way outside of their box. They don't have the politics in their locker to manage what's coming their way.
Absolutely. Well, with that in mind, let's look at this Danny Krueger video. And it was good to have a laugh there, by the way, because there's not been many laughs this week. I didn't laugh. No. It's been such a dark time. But let's. So Danny Krueger defected from the Tories. If you don't know much about Danny Krueger, well, he's a sort of social conservative. He wrote a whole book called Covenant, I believe. I haven't actually read this book, but he's sort of on the NatCon side.
A serious conservative.
Yes, a Christian. Covenant, the new politics of home, neighborhood, and nation. So he's a serious thinker, serious guy, and he's a big hitter in the Tory party, not necessarily in terms of sort of public awareness or clout, but just in terms of seriousness. And he's a lifelong Conservative Party person. And he defected, and this was quite surprising for a lot of people. It wasn't publicized, and we'll just watch maybe a little bit of the end of his speech here.
So let me finish with this. We on the right of politics face a choice: to embrace the change that is happening, or to go down to a deserved demise. To follow the flame of conservatism as it passes to a new torch, or to stand still and get darker and colder and more pointless. To be conservative is not to worship the ashes of defunct institutions. It is to preserve the fire that gives our country its life. The new custodian of that fire, the best hope we have, maybe our last hope, and I fervently hope the next Prime Minister, is Nigel Farage. I am proud to follow him, and I hope others will do the same, because Britain needs reform. Thank you.
Okay, it was just the end of his speech, because I like that, just because it was sort of eloquent, and it gave a sense of what Krueger is all about, the imagery and the intellect. And there are other parts of the speech which are quite good as well, where he talks about how the Tories are in stasis. They didn't do the changes he wanted. He was on Jenrick's team. This is well known. He obviously then lost because Kemi won. He was pains to point out it's nothing personal against Kemi, and she has a very tough job and so on. But he was also clear to point out the strategy is completely wrong. And at one point during the press conference, he said, I don't think disappearing for 2 years was the answer. And Farage just started doing his sort of Farage laugh in the corner. It was a sort of a dig clearly at Kemi's strategy, even if he's very courteous about her as a person. She has dismissed it, sort of saying, well, he's made clear it's not about me. This kind of thing's obviously going to happen when you're in a rebuilding phase. And she's just tried to sort of palm it off. That's all she can do, but it's very bad for her. And it's fascinating to me because a couple of reasons. One is the reform cultists who attack you in the comments. I try and be very balanced, but the reform cultists who attack you, like, oh, we hate the Uni Party. What are you doing? We've got to crush the Tories. And we've got to go reform. And it's like, you do realize they're all Tories. Okay, Sarah Poach and Lee Anderson, Jake Berry, Danny Krueger now. Tice wanted to be, Farage basically wanted to be, they're basically the Tories. It's actually closer and closer to what Trump did. We said we couldn't have a Trump in our system because you can't just take over a party like that. They were foolish to not allow Farage in, but essentially he did just take over a wing of the Tories. If you look at that Tory conference, remember when he went there and he was dancing with Priti Patel, and everyone was saying, wow, Farage has been really well received. He's the most famous, most liked person at the Tory party conference, and everyone's coming up to him. He had already taken over the Tory party at that point. It's just they didn't let him in. And Sunak was ostensibly the leader, but he was talking about smoking bans and something about sixth form. Like, it's completely just irrelevant nonsense.
Service.
Yeah, the guy wasn't elected anyway, really. The members wanted trust. The system ejected her. They tried to bring back in Sunak, and it was an attempt to say, oh, we're just going back to managerial liberal elite politics, guys. And it's like, yeah, but it's moved on, as you say. So it moved on to Farage. He'd already essentially was a leader of the Tory party in a sense already, but they wouldn't let him in. So he had to come back to reform. And they're now defecting to him. Now, if you were going to... So, one, it's ridiculous to pretend they're going to be this complete revolution from the Tories because they're literally the same people. But I'm okay with that in a sense if they're good ones like Danny Krueger. Where I'm confused is it's Jake Berry one day, Remainer, complete Tory wet, just ridiculous. No one wants it. Matt Goodwin writes long pieces. Why is this guy in reform? Doesn't make any sense. Then it's like Nadine Dorries, advocate of Boris, advocate of the Online Safety Act, complete bizarre choice, especially when she's advocated Boris, who's the architect of the Boris wave, which the biggest wave of immigration we've ever had, completely antithesis of what reform's all supposed to be about. So that doesn't make any sense. But then Krueger does make sense. Where it's strange with Krueger is that Reform have not been a socially conservative party. They've been sketchy on assisted dying. They don't really talk about Christianity except in a very vague way. They don't talk about the family except in a vague way. You don't know they don't talk about abortion. You don't know what their social conservative policies are. Krueger's a person who's all about social conservatism. So will he bring that to Reform, or will he be sort of dashed against the rocks of their indifference? I'm not really sure. And that's where it gets interesting as well. And will he shore that up? And lastly, Paul, before you come in, I should have said, he is there to prepare them for government. He's explicitly there for that. So they acknowledge their weakness there. And in one way, it makes them the same elite as we've always had because they're just Tories. But in another, it's them getting serious about, okay, we need someone like this to show us how the heck this is actually done. And he's already mentioned Krueger on GB News. A big part of it will be reforming the civil service and, of course, the ECHR and so on. Anyway, your thoughts?
Yeah, the preparation for government position is incredibly important. And if you don't know who Danny Krueger is, then that's fine. He's had a couple of things. There was something that he stood up for in COVID that's escaping me right now. Lockdowns. He was anti-lockdown.
The schools for kids. Schools not closing.
Yeah, he had some very strong views on that. But other than that, he's kept very much in the background. But he's very, very well known and incredibly well thought of in Westminster. A serious politician that Kemi Badenoch will be sorry to lose. And it legitimizes Reform. There's no two ways about it. And there's, with regards to the social conservatism, I don't think Nigel would have wanted Danny Krueger to talk too much about that when he was at stood up in front of the lectern the other day, because he will have some very straightforward Christian views on things like gay marriage, the transgender debate, and all sorts of other things going on in society at the moment that Nigel Farage seems to be treading the line on. But Danny Krueger, he's a serious politician. And I think there were a few people in the press that were very shocked when he came out. Not many people knew it was going to be him. They'd sent out a couple of red herrings. I think they thought at one point Esther McVeigh was likely to be the person that was stepping across, and she still might. And obviously Suella Braverman still might. I think that he will not open the floodgates, but he will not only legitimize Reform as a serious political entity, but he will legitimize the stepping across as well. Because Danny Krueger is a bit like Steven Gerrard just deciding to go and play for Manchester United because they've now got the principles that he supports as a captain of a football club. It's as strong as that, really. He's conservative through and through. There was no other place for him. If he's decided that conservatism under the Conservative Party is dead, then it probably is, Nick.
Yeah, and he was very firm on that. If we had time, we'd play more clips where he did say the Conservative Party is dead, but conservatism isn't. It was that clear. A couple of other things swing to mind. One, coming off what you've said there about his actual views. Yeah, Krueger got in a little bit of trouble for a clip from, I believe it was from NatCon, where he talked about the normative family, and all the left freaked out about this terrible phrase. And of course, all it meant was, of course, there has to be a norm, and the norm happens to be a man and a woman raising a child. Of course, that has to be the norm. If you want the species to continue, unless you're going to use exclusively some sort of artificial methods, of course, that has to be the norm. It doesn't mean hate gay people, but it means they're by definition not the norm. And people like Andrew Doyle are fine with that. Any sensible gay person, I think, would probably be fine with that. But Farage did tackle a question where he didn't let it go to Krueger. On your point, because I watched the whole thing, as I'm wont to do, part of this blooming job. If this is a job, he watched the whole. What am I talking about? My brain just had a brain spasm. He took the question instead of Krueger. So there was a question about the family. What do you mean? How do you feel about it? Is it all about the man and woman heterosexual family, whatever? And Farage was like, well, that's the most stable. It's the most stable stability, stable. Of course, not in my case necessarily. Little joke, and then
a little bit of genius, I thought. It
was clever. It was clever because if you go to Krueger, he'll go, well, here's a very serious point about the.
He will start with Adam and Eve and work forward from there, I think.
Let me tell you about the serpent.
Yeah.
Everyone just quickly writing. All the journalists thinking, Adam and Eve, question mark, they're learning about the Bible.
Exactly. So there will be an element of that, but there is a place, you've already pointed it out, because conservatism is the backbone of reform. And he's essentially saving conservatism. He's just rebranding it, Nigel Farage. And I think that will win voters over. And he's also much more flexible and agile to deal with the problems of today in the way that the two major parties cannot. Liberal Democrats had unbeknownst to them, because they've got Ed Davey in charge, they've literally got the best opportunity now to make themselves a prominent party on the basis that they are already mobilized, they're already familiar with everything that goes on in Parliament, but they're unable to change their politics. And he's just, turning down invitations to Buckingham Palace tomorrow because Donald Trump's going to be there. He's removing himself from any opportunity to shape politics in the future, and he just writes letters to people asking if they'll play FIFA. It doesn't make any sense. They're dead as well. If you think the Lib Dems are going anywhere, all the Lib Dems are doing is taking up the votes of people who don't know what they want from politics anymore. That's exactly all they're doing. So there is only one future.
Weirdly, the Greens and your party will do they'll probably do better than Lib Dems.
Yeah, when Nick says your party, he's not telling you that I've started a party.
No. And if he did, it would be the
Ridiculous
Austrian Painter Party. But can I just
show
say
you they coloured it in actually, Nick? Some of the
we'll put that in the paywall. Sorry to interrupt, but can I just say a couple of things? I'm not convinced Reform is a Conservative party. I think it's a sort of liberal, old-fashioned Lib Dems with a bit more on immigration. I've said this before. Orange Book era Lib Dems. I think they're sort of free market and they're socially liberal. And that's where Krueger's interesting, because he's not socially liberal. And I think there is a debate like, what is reform going to be? Henry Hill wrote this piece I've alluded to before in The Critic, saying who are their sort of natural constituency? Who is the classic reform voter? It's not really clear. It's disaffected people at the moment, but it's not clear. Some of them are Thatcherites. Some of them are social conservatives. Some are just people saying two fingers up. Some are former Labour voters, red wall type people, and they want to nationalise steel and things, which Farage says will do. So who are Reform? Are they a bit like the SDP? They don't seem like they are, because they're very much more libertarian on the free market. So what we never get is that offer that the SDP have, which is...
Well, the SDP are now defunct because I think Reform have taken all their key policies and they've got the limelight. I mean, unfortunately for the SDP, not that they've ever been fully in the limelight, but I don't think I'm being unfair by saying that. I mean, there's so much more we can say about Farage, and it leads back into all the other things that we'll talk about in the paid section. So perhaps we'll just leave it there, Nick.
The only other thing I wanted to add, though, Paul, is the way I look at it is Farage is a bit like Trump versus Krueger as Vance, I was thinking, because Farage is not really, he doesn't really have convictions about Christianity and so on. He's just a high charisma politician, good on the overview, whereas actually Krueger's much more serious and serious about the Christian stuff. That's who I compare it to in my head. Yeah. I think there's something in that. The last thing I'll say, on it, so people don't shout that we've missed this, not that they necessarily would, is the aspect of the technical aspect of the by-election. They're not going to have a by-election, and they've said this has not been done in other places. They're not going to do that now. People are saying some people are saying you should. Some Tories have been quite mean online.
Farage has called for it in the past. In 2022, he's called, I forget which politician now, it's just come to mind. I didn't research, I should have kept it close to mind, but there is a tweet from 2022 from Nigel
Fromage has as well.
But saying that there should be a by-election for a Labour MP that was
right.
going somewhere.
Well, the argument is that, yes, because he's changed party, but Krueger's like, well, he doesn't think it's necessary. And I think he'll do well anyway, because now he's in Reform. They'll still know him as a local MP. I think it is a risk for him, though, as he pointed out. That's a good seat for him. He'll get some people who won't vote for him because of that. There'll be some disgruntled Tories who won't vote for him because of it. So he said, really, for me, this is a risk. When people see it as opportunism, I think Jake Berry was opportunism, because who's Jake Berry? Like he's like just trying to save his career, I think. Sorry, Jake, if you're not. But Krueger,
I don't comments, Jake.
Yeah, I don't think there's any evidence that Krueger is, because it's safer for him to stay with the Tories and just sort of ride that out in his seat, whereas this is a bigger risk, and a lot of Tories are saying, oh, he's a traitor, and some of the voters will think that. So I think it is a risk, and he actually wants to get things done. That's my belief.
And my final point on that would be, we know this because he spoke very seriously. It did feel for the first time that there was an adult in that room, so to speak. You felt like, I said it before, he legitimized. You felt like this is a very serious politician. He didn't go, well, I agonized over the weekend and I consulted my God, and then I went out into the garden and prayed to the baby Jesus. He didn't do anything that he was not a motive at all. It was very matter of fact. It's run its course. I still have a mission. I believe that mission can be fulfilled here, and I place my trust in this man.
Yeah, and he said the conversation had really started ever since Lee Anderson defected, and he and Farage having loose conversations about it, and there wasn't one particular moment. And he said it's been a gradual thing. Had Jenrick have won, presumably he'd still be in the Tories. But Jenrick didn't win. It went to Kemi, and it's just obvious to him there's no future in it. And I think Kemi has, to use my Ruben Amorim metaphor, maybe he'll turn it around, but she's very much, as he said, disappeared for 2 years. Even asked today about it, she talked about where we want to make it clear what our conservative principles are: anti-net zero, fiscal responsibility, not spending beyond our means. I'm thinking, the net zero, okay, but not going beyond our means it's not really a powerful message. I'm thinking like, this is all. She didn't really talk about immigration. I'm thinking like, you've just not grasped the moment we're at. It's she's just too safe. She's not Sunak, but she's too Sunak-esque.
Too conventional, too stuck in the convention, and has not looked across the pond at what Donald Trump's been able to do with the Republican Party, which was not and turned it into the Donald Trump Party, by the way. It doesn't represent necessarily what the Republican Party did in 2015, 2014. It's totally changed. It's now represented by one figure. They looked at that and thought it's impossible here. And I am pretty sure that on my time podcasting with you, I've said it's very difficult to achieve here as well. But do you know what? Nigel Farage is incredibly close to achieving something very similar to what Donald Trump has done in the States. And I think it's catching people by surprise. Yeah,
he is. He's just done it in a different way. Instead of him joining the party, he's let them all, like a sort of magnet, they've all come to him. And it's a different way of taking over the Tories. A pity it's him and not Rupert Lowe. But there it is. The Reform is going to be the option, it looks like. There'll probably be sort of pacts, Moggs not join them. But he talks about sort of pacts. The Tories and Reform will be one thing in one sense or another. And in two senses, really. There'll be former Reform MPs, that'll be the most of the party, former Tory MPs. And there'll probably be pacts in certain areas to not run against each other. So it's basically the Tories. But you hope that you get rid of the Tory wets like that. But let's see. Very interesting, though. Okay, well, let's do the last bit on nickdixon.net, where we'll talk about this bizarre comment from Pam Bondi and all the developments after the horrible events in America. Thank you for watching the free one on YouTube or listening on Podbean or wherever you listen. Go to nickdixon.net, sign up. It's £5, and it's basically just over £4 if you get the yearly options. It's very cheap. We've got lots of great content on there, and we're constantly smashing out great content. Relentlessly. Paul is at Paul Cox Comedy. Anything else you want to add, Paul?
No, you can subscribe to me on Substack if you want. I'm not producing much at the moment, but if you want to help me out, you can. I would say if you've only got enough to support one, support nickdixon.net. If you've got enough support to bang a couple of quid my way, I'll happily receive it. It'll help me support Nick in what he's building as well. But yeah, please come and join me at Paul Cox Comedy everywhere.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see some of you over at nickdixon.net.